Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Iran confirms its top aerospace commander, Major General Amirali Hajizadeh, was killed in an Israeli airstrike, triggering internet curbs, flight disruptions, and raising fears of wider conflict. Investigators have recovered the black box. At least 265 people died when an Air India Boeing 787 crashed into a residential area in Ahmedabad, India, with only one survivor. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Modi visited the site and Tata Group announced financial aid for victims' families. 8 Palestinian aid workers from the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation were killed in an ambush based on Hamas, amid reports of injuries and possible kidnappings, while an internet blackout has paralyzed aid operations across Gaza. The EU has extended temporary protection for Ukrainians fleeing war until March 2027. This move ensures continued access to shelter, work, and education across member states. Turkey says over 273,000 Syrian refugees have returned to their homeland. Local authorities attribute the returns to changing conditions since the collapse of President Bashar al-Assad and rise of new head Ahmed al-Sharaa. Tokyo's defense minister has called it unacceptable for China to place blame on Japan over recent near misses involving their military aircraft around Japan, insisting Japan followed international norms and China should own its actions. India and China have agreed to speed up the resumption of direct flights as part of broader efforts to stabilize and improve bilateral relations. The decision came after top diplomats from both countries met in New Delhi and reaffirmed their commitment to address trade and economic differences. The UN General Assembly has passed a resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and urging global pressure on Israel to end its blockade and allow aid into the Strip. Tensions are rising as Israeli airstrikes continue across Iran, with missile attacks confirmed on the Natanz nuclear site. Iranian state media reports superficial damage to the facility, with most damage occurring on the surface, leaving Natanz underground enrichment capabilities intact. Outskirts of Tabriz and Shiraz have also been targeted in what Iran is calling an aggressive attack. In a recent statement aired on state TV, President Masoud Pezeshkian declared that Iran will make Israel regret its recent attacks, which included strikes on various locations, including nuclear sites. Meanwhile, Israeli embassies worldwide, including those in the United States and the United Kingdom, have closed their doors today in response to recent deadly Israeli airstrikes in Iran. The Israeli missions issued a statement confirming the temporary shutdown of embassies in countries like Sweden, Norway, Germany, Nigeria, Russia, Ukraine, and France. Additionally, Iran's Ministry of Communications announced that nationwide internet restrictions have been implemented following Israel's strikes. According to the ministry, the restrictions are temporary and will be lifted once normalcy is restored. After Israel's Operation Rising Lion resulted in the deaths of several senior military leaders, Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei has appointed new commanders, including Brig General Mohammad Pakpour as the new IRGC chief and Major General Abdulrahim Mousavi as the new chief of staff. Now we have guests joining us for this discussion. Lev Aran is a senior journalist live from Israel. Lev, does this level of retaliation from Israel mark a shift in its traditional deterrence doctrine?
First of all, thank you for having me. We cannot deny that we are on a new page in Iranian-Israeli relationship, and it has a relevancy also to the global arena, even to India. And it seems that once Israel understood that Iran is not doesn't really care about the safeguards, the international nuclear safeguards, that it had to comply. Israel was thinking that it has no other, it has to start some kind of a war against Iran. So this is the situation right now.
And what are the reactions, or what happens to the reputation of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu inside domestically and also internationally, as it has been very
It's a very good question, because let's say, unlike the Gaza front, that Israel domestically is divided, and at least a very big chunk among Israelis think that we need some kind of a ceasefire with Hamas in order to get all the hostages back, because as a country, we cannot leave them in the Hamas tunnels. As far as Iran is concerned, Netanyahu was always scolded that he's not brave enough with Iran. Even 10 years back, even 12 years back, Netanyahu was scolded that he needs to attack Iran, but he's not brave enough. He doesn't find the guts to do it. So I wouldn't say that the war is very popular, because a war cannot be really popular. But in the case of Iran, there is a consensus that Israel had no other choice.
And given that Netanyahu is facing a lot of opposition within Tel Aviv, including the Tel Aviv recent protests taking streets, what are the reactions domestically as of now?
It is not only Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is a big city, but you could see demonstrations in many, many places. I think that as far as the mini war with Iran is concerned, what Netanyahu decided is quite popular.
And now moving on to the world reactions, and can third-party mediators like Turkey, Qatar, or Oman still realistically de-escalate tensions between Israel and Iran at this point?
This is important, because we could assume that one reason why the Americans gave a green light to Israel to attack, because I do not believe, unlike the BBC, I do not believe that Netanyahu could really start this mini war with Iran without some kind of American support. I do believe that the Americans gave him a green light because they felt that the negotiations in Oman with Iran, they're not fruitful enough, that Iran is very weak now. But when it comes to Oman, they do not understand, they do not digest, they hold a very sticky wicket, and they could not demand that much of America. So I guess one reason why Americans support Israel now is because they believe that Iran will go back to the negotiation table, but in a more, let's say, modest and humble way.
Now, building on to Iran's risks, could Iran resort to cyber attacks or asymmetrical warfare beyond the region, targeting Israel's allies globally, according to you, Lev?
Iran has a lot of capabilities, but Iran is not as strong as it was a year ago, because the Iranian axis of Lebanon, Hezbollah, and Syria, the Assad family, and even the Houthis in Yemen, and of course Hamas in Gaza, they're all much weaker, or they're not in the arena anymore. So of course, Iran still has a lot of capabilities, cyber and not only cyber, but Iran now is much weaker than it was before. And I guess it was a window of opportunity for Israel and for Netanyahu's government.
And what indicators should political risk firms be watching now to assess whether this becomes a sustained regional war or remains a sharp flashpoint?
I do not believe it will be a regional war in the sense that I don't see many friends of Iran around. They had only one real friend, which was Bashar Assad in Syria. But now, if we delve into other Arab countries, most of them are like moderate Sunni countries that hate the Iranian Shia regime as much as Israel hates it. So I cannot see at this stage many allies that Iran can befriend at this early stage. But you know, Middle East is full of surprises. So let's wait and see.
Thank you very much, Lev Aran, for joining us and sharing your expertise as a senior journalist. Now we move on to our next story. A tragic crash struck Ahmedabad yesterday as Air India flight AI171 fell moments after takeoff, killing over 240 people. The Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner headed to London Gatwick crashed into a hostel at BJ Medical College in Meghaninagar, triggering a massive fireball. Only one person survived. The dead include 169 Indian passengers, 59 British nations, 7 Portuguese nations, and 1 Canadian nation. Former Gujarat Chief Minister Vijay Rupani was among the victims. 24 people, including 4 medical students, died on the ground. Rescue crews recovered 265 bodies, most charred. 6 victims were identified and handed over to their families. As of now, DNA profiling is underway with samples from 215 relatives. Identification may take 72 hours. 1 black box was recovered, officials confirmed. The cause is still unknown, but engine thrust loss is being probed. The Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau is leading the probe. The NIA and other central agencies have visited the crash site. The Tata Group announced 10 million rupees in compensation to each victim's family, while Air India is obliged to pay 15 million rupees under the Montreal Convention. Total payouts may reach 3.6 billion rupees. The aircraft was insured. The hostel building had been completed just last year. Most passengers were found strapped in their seats. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited the site and met injured survivors. Sniffer dogs and cranes continue the debris search. Jet fuel fumes still hang in the air. Air India may ground all Air India Dreamliners for safety checks. The aircraft joined Air India in 2014 and was its first Dreamliner crash since 2011. Boeing has sent experts to assist. Global leaders, including Xi Jinping, expressed condolences. India's foreign ministry is now coordinating with affected countries. Separately, an Air India flight from Phuket to Delhi made an emergency landing today after a bomb threat. Now we have guests joining us for this discussion. He's a retired wing commander, Rakesh Singh Chauhan. He's an aviation expert. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. Should Air India be held criminally liable for this disaster, especially if safety lapses are proven?
See, unless there is a proper court of inquiry, we can't really talk about all these things. So I think once the formal investigation is done, then only we will know the real root cause. Otherwise, till then, we can't really talk anything of such a nature. You know, blaming anybody. I think it's too early, and we are not the right forum. You know, so this will be after the investigation is done. people will find a suitable, thing, and thereafter take appropriate action.
Indeed. And with the black box recovered, what key data will investigators prioritize to determine the cause for this crash?
See, flight data recorder records everything. It is a device wherein everything which is happening inside the aircraft gets recorded. So when we are talking about loss of engine thrust, the all related parameters like what was the load it was carrying, what was the fuel it was carrying, where was the CG, what was the elevator position, at what point when the landing gear was selected up or down, whether the flaps were being operated or whatever. So I'm saying every possible detail which is required for such an investigation is there in the flight data recorder, and whole thing will be checked right from the starting sequence that what was the aircraft configuration, and thereafter while it taxied out, was there any abnormality, because there are a lot of safety devices and safety systems, and there are a lot of sensors which warn the pilot each time there's a problem. Let's say if the ailerons are not set properly, depending on what is the configuration, there's a proper warning. So even if I see a lot of people talking about flaps not being selected properly, may not be a true thing, because there are a lot of warnings, and no plane can just take off when the pilot is hearing such kind of warnings. So certainly black box will reveal everything, and find what exactly happened in this particular case.
And Rakesh, are Air India and the government's announced compensations adequate and timely under international norms like the Montreal Convention, according to you?
See, with respect to that, I won't be able to comment much, because my field has been into, military aviation mainly, and I have been an aircraft accident instructor in Institute of Flight Safety. So I don't think with respect to compensation, I will be able to comment anything special.
And is there any indication of sabotage or foul play, especially with the NIA involved and another bomb threat emerging the very next day?
See, in such a scenario, or what happened with Malaysian airline accident, wherein a lot of things are not known, or looking at 9/11 attack, nothing can be ruled out. And certainly in such a case, the investigator will look into each and everything. As the videos and whatever we see, it seems to be a case of loss of lift, which is dependent lot of lift, and also the engine thrust, because the aircraft could not sustain its takeoff. So in such a condition, actually it is dependent on very many factors. However, the aspect of sabotage, when we talk, certainly there can be something very, if an expert, if a Boeing engineer wants, certainly something can go wrong. So I'm saying certainly these things will be investigated as a matter of routine practice, and we will know the results.
And now moving on to a bigger picture, Rakesh, what responsibility does Boeing hold in this tragedy, considering their global scrutiny over recent aircraft safety in recent years?
With respect to Dreamliner, there are some cases wherein people had been talking.
Hello, sorry, you're cutting off. Can you please repeat it?
What I'm saying is that
Yes.
there have been certain failures with respect to its batteries. Otherwise, there has been no major accident or incident that was discussed or it happened any time before this particular crash. This is the first of its kind of a crash which has happened with respect to Boeing Dreamliner. So I don't think there is any safety related issues with respect to this particular aircraft. Yeah, maybe Boeing 737 Max, if we talk, yeah, that is entirely different aircraft. But with respect to Dreamliner, there have been no safety record issues which have been discussed in past, except a few cases, maybe one or two cases, which are not. This is something very serious. This particular thing is very, very serious. Both engines going off, both engine failure. When there are too many redundancies, the aircraft has lot many backups. It is something very, very special. So certainly Boeing will take all due precautions and whatever is required to investigate, because after all, it is their machine. There are so many aircraft which are flying all over the world. So maybe the aircraft, this particular fleet right now in India, maybe it may be grounded for the sake of investigation. I'm not very sure what action they will take, but certainly Boeing will be keen because they are the manufacturer.
Thank you very much, Rakesh Singh Chauhan, for bringing your expertise as an aviation expert. Now we move on to our next story. The United Nations General Assembly has voted overwhelmingly to demand an immediate, unconditional and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, with over 149 countries in favor and just 12 against, including the United States and Israel. The non-binding resolution also condemns the use of starvation as a weapon of war and demands the lifting of Israel's blockade on humanitarian aid. Let's listen in to what some UN representatives had to say.
This draft resolution sends an unacceptable message to Hamas and other Iran-backed terrorist proxies. And that message is, you will be rewarded for taking hostages, diverting aid, and launching attacks from civilian areas. Mr. President, colleagues, blind support to Hamas by the members of this body further undermines the meaningful diplomacy underway to free the hostages and emboldens Hamas as the terrorist group continues to reject ceasefire proposals accepted by Israel.
Israel and Hamas need to agree to an immediate and unconditional ceasefire, that Hamas must immediately and unconditionally release the hostages, and that Israel, as the occupying power, must end its blocks on aid and ensure unhindered humanitarian access. And crucially, there must be an end to any actions that stand in the way of a two-state solution and the best chance for peace for the Israeli and Palestinian.
This comes amid escalating violence. A deadly ambush on a bus carrying aid workers from the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation left at least 8 dead, with Hamas accused of this attack. Despite the attack and a total internet blackout across Gaza, GHF delivered a record 2.6 million meals on Thursday. Israeli strikes continue across the Strip, killing over 100 people in the past 24 hours, including 21 near GHF distribution aid sites. The United Nations has condemned the chaos, warning that the aid model is collapsing into what it called a dystopian Hunger Games. A high-level two-state solution conference is expected next week in New York, but with little U.S. support, prospects remain uncertain. Now we have guest Martin Sai Wrights. He's an international affairs expert joining us live from Quito, Ecuador. Thank you for joining us today. What leverage does a non-binding UN resolution really hold when key military players like US and Israel ignore it?
I think this resolution is merely symbolic. I don't think it has enough weight to do or to change the reality of this war. And I think the UN should be more concerned about cooperating with Israel so Israel can feel safe to help the Palestinian people in Gaza in a responsible way. That means that Israel won't be threatened by any kind of threat coming from Hamas or from abroad. and it can ensure its own security and also give the necessary supplements and aid to the Palestinian people in Gaza. But I think this is just symbolic. It's not doing anything to resolve the problem. And I think UN is failing to absolutely condemn Hamas, even though they ask for the liberation of the hostages. They are labeling a democratic country with a terror organization. I mean, the UN is treating both sides as if they were equal, and I think the UN should be more strict in condemning Hamas, condemning the international support for this movement and the violence that this terror group is doing, and it should be more open to cooperate with Israel so Israel can help the Palestinians.
And now looking at the bigger picture, Martin, what role are regional powers like Egypt, Qatar and Saudi Arabia playing in pushing for a ceasefire or hostage deal?
So all of these countries, especially Saudi Arabia and Egypt, they are very close allies with the US. And they're not going to stop being allies, and they're not going to be hurting this long friendship because of the Palestinians. Of course, Saudi Arabia will not regulate the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Israel until they're demanding that there will be a Palestinian state. However, even if Israel does not accept this demand, Saudi Arabia is not going to start a war against Israel, is not going to do anything that can harm its relationship with the UN, with the US. And in the other hand, Egypt is already a they signed peace with Israel. They have regular international relations with Israel, and they're not going to ruin it, and they're not going to ruin their economic relations with the US. So I think Egypt is very neutral in this aspect. They're not taking any side. I think Egypt is not going to push Israel for any Palestinian state or for any ceasefire. However, Saudi Arabia, I think they're going to push symbolically, not bellically or economically.
And according to how does the attack on the GHF bus, as of what we know of today, reflect the growing power struggle within Gaza Strip beyond Israel-Hamas conflict?
I think, again, this is a false flag attack. Hamas has been doing a lot of terror attacks against the civilians in Gaza because they want them to stay silent, because they want to keep their power. They're acknowledging that the people in Gaza are no longer supporting this terror organization. They want to shoot it down. The people in Gaza, they just want to live normal lives. And I mean, you have everything. Also, you have radicalized people that are still crazy fanatic people in Gaza Strip. Part of the population is still supporting Hamas, but the normal and sane people, they just want to have peace. They want to live a normal life, even if that means to be in terms with Israel. And there's a lot of protests against Hamas from the civilians in Gaza, and it means people are waking up. And yeah, Hamas is doing a lot of crimes against their own population, and it should be taken as a great threat for the Gaza Strip and for the peace in the Middle East. I think the UN should address these issues.
And is next week's upcoming two-state solution conference, which is hosted by France and Saudi Arabia in New York, likely to yield any concrete steps, or is it just diplomatic posturing again?
It's not gonna solve any problem. Saudi Arabia is not in the side, or Saudi Arabia is not neutral in this issue. Obviously, they're taking a side with the Palestinians, and Macron is also not neutral. He has been condemning Israel only, and he has not been addressing all of the terror attacks and the crimes perpetrated by Hamas. So I think this is a one-sided, biased conference. We're not gonna see any outcome out of this between these two nations, and I think Macron is not neutral at all, and this is merely symbolic. They have no power at all to to enforce whatever they want from Israel. So the only way that I think the whole world can have any kind of approach to Israel is through diplomacy and through acknowledge that Israel has the right to protect itself and to be safe. So this is the only way, in my opinion, that they can change any policy from Israel.
Thank you very much, Martin Seirites, for joining us and sharing your expertise as an international affairs expert. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.